I've honed in on specific authors and talked about their genius before, but none have the cultural heft of Agatha Christie, so I've got to try and do this right. Agatha Christie is one of the most beloved and best-selling authors of all time. Her works have been and continue to be adapted over and over again in different ways, on stage, on the radio, and on the big screen and the small screen. In fact, her stage adaptations were written by her. My favourite thing that I've ever seen written by Agatha Christie was the play A Witness for the Prosecution. Adapted from a short story that she wrote, she's the one who adapted it. She wrote the script for that play. And it's an absolute masterpiece. It's my favourite thing Agatha Christie ever wrote. Now, I should say up front that I haven't read every single Agatha Christie book. There are a lot of them. But I've read my fair share. And I want to talk about the genius of Agatha Christie. What exactly sets her apart from not just her contemporaries, but authors in general, literature in general. What was it about her? And I think a lot of it came down to tone as much as it did her genius plotting and puzzle writing. The first thing I want to address is the fact that murder mysteries being the quintessential cozy form of fiction and literature is kind of an oxymoron. It's a strange thing. Why is it that stories that revolve around the murder of an individual or a group of people, a crime scene with blood and knives and bullets, why are these things so cozy? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think the main thing is the puzzle aspect. A murder is a puzzle to solve, and solving puzzles is cozy. It's something that people do on a rainy Sunday afternoon. They do jigsaw puzzles, or crosswords, or word searches, or Sudoku. Or we play board games where we try to solve puzzles and win things. And a murder mystery is kind of an extension of that. The murder aspect just adds a bit of spice and flavour to it. But Agatha Christie very much honed in on that coziness, and she did so with her character writing, especially Hercule Poirot, a man that she actually hated. She hated Poirot, and she was often flummoxed and frustrated by the fact that people liked him so much. I didn't read a Poirot book until I'd read all of the biggest and best standalone Christie novels, and I immediately hated him. He's a horrible, aggressively arrogant person. But people are fun to hate, and you still respect Poirot for being a genius detective. However, Poirot's stories are very different to her standalones, and I've talked about this before. In a lot of Agatha Christie's stories, you, the reader, are provided with all the pieces necessary to solve this puzzle. But in at least some of the Poirot stories, you're not, and you really have to take a back seat. Sit back and watch as he solves a puzzle that you couldn't solve because he knows more than you do. For example, my favourite Agatha Christie book is probably Crooked House, a standalone novel that she wrote really late in her career, and she herself called it her masterpiece. I'm pretty sure this was her favourite novel that she wrote, and I solved it halfway through, and I was really happy with myself. I actually found it kind of obvious, and I liked that. It made me feel proud, but I still enjoyed the story, and especially the characters. The characters are great. And then again, one of her most famous and beloved stories is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which is the first Poirot book I read, and I'm pretty sure it's unsolvable, except by Poirot. There are so many things that he picks up on and keeps to himself throughout the story that you wouldn't have noticed because Christie didn't let you know. And I think that's a really curious thing. I felt like I could not have solved this without watching Poirot do it. This was the Poirot show. And that's irritating. It's almost like Christie is encouraging us to hate him. And in itself, that's kind of fun. I appreciate that, for an author to do that to her own protagonist. But it's not always the case. My favourite Poirot book that I've read so far is Five Little Pigs. This is a really underrated Agatha Christie book. And again, I solved this. I solved it probably 3/4 of the way through. I figured out what was going on. There's a red herring that I also saw coming. And I thought, yeah, great, okay, so a Poirot book that I was able to solve. So he didn't have all the pieces. So it's not something that she always does, but I definitely think it was the case with Roger Ackroyd. What I'm doing here is pointing out that Christie isn't perfect from my perspective, but she is incredibly varied. How in the world could someone write dozens of murder mystery stories and keep them fresh, even when her ideas are recycled, and even her twists felt recycled? There would be something that differentiated them from the ones that came before. Whether it be something as simple as the setting, which can completely throw you off, or the characters and their motivations and their relationships to each other, all of these things can create red herrings. All of these things can change motives and causes and manners of murder. I recently read The ABC Murders, another Poirot book, and this is so different from every other Poirot book that I've read and every other Christie book that I've read, because this is closer to a thriller than a cozy murder mystery. In this, Poirot is tasked and taunted to follow and catch a serial killer. This person is traveling around England and killing people in very random ways, but providing specific clues. The first place that the killer goes is a town that starts with an A, and the victim is a person whose initials are AA. The next town starts with a B, and the victim's initials are BB, as it goes on. And around the time of every murder, they provide Poirot with a letter that taunts and teases and irritates him. And Poirot also has to concede that some people have to die in order for him to build his case, join the dots, put the pieces closer together. He cannot solve this case until a pattern becomes clear to him, and that means people have to die. So this is a particularly dark book in my opinion. It's certainly not my favourite, but I really appreciate how different it is from other Poirot stories and other Christie books. So many Agatha Christie stories are about a single death and the puzzle surrounding it and the characters surrounding it. Here, we're moving from place to place. There are multiple deaths, multiple murders. This feels way more like a grisly crime drama in that sense. So one of the great things about Christie is her variety. The fact that she saw crime from so many different angles, and she saw so many opportunities when it comes to the ways of killing people, the circumstances and settings, the background of the person who dies, the modes and methods, the people who kill, their relationship to the deceased, and their relationships to all of the other people involved. People who are suspects, people who are involved in solving the crime, people who are somehow connected to the setting or to the victim's history, people who are mourning, people who are frightened and confused, people who think that they might be next. There are so many different ways to do it. You've got all these different things, everything I just listed, all the different places and things and people, and they can all be put together in different ways to create an original concept. And the more you read Agatha Christie, the more you see these as individual things, pieces of a puzzle that can be reordered, rewritten, relabeled, put in different places, connected in different ways, connected to pieces they haven't been connected to before, and a new original story is born, something that feels tonally similar to everything else because the pieces remain the same, but the plot, the story, and the characters are different enough for it to be a fresh and exciting case for you to try and solve. The genius of Agatha Christie comes in the puzzle, the fact that she's able to create a fresh puzzle, but with recycled concepts, ideas, and pieces. However, as I said at the beginning, there's the tone. The tone and the puzzle are the two most important aspects. Murder mysteries are cozy. Christie must have known that. So in order to lean on that coziness, she creates puzzles because puzzles are cozy, but she also leans on the tone. The characters are often not camp because they can be very grounded and they're not often self-aware, but they are certainly flamboyant to a point. The cozy settings of her books really help with the coziness, obviously. So many of these deaths are set in places that are considered homely, cozy, friendly. It could be someone's home, and it often is. Sometimes it's the home of a rich person, so the house in itself is large enough to act as a puzzle box, because you have libraries and studies, areas to entertain people, a basement full of wine, stuff like that. And that in itself is cozy. A big house full of people, a party, a dinner party, whatever. These things are also cozy and friendly and warming to a point. And the people are often quite vibrant. And they will each have a definitive personality, a motive, a style of relationship, a way that they interact with other people. And all of that leads to a cozy vibe. All of that makes them feel relatable to a point, hateable to a point, and pieces in a puzzle. You can see how the different relationships between people almost come to define the mystery. You have a room full of 10 people. Some of them are suspects, some of them are informants, some of them are detectives, one of them is the victim, and they themselves are a puzzle. You are connecting them, not just through their relationships to each other, but also how their personalities clash and connect with each other. Some people, their personalities fit together perfectly like magnets. Others repel each other. And you're creating a personality puzzle, a relationship puzzle between these people. And because each person has to have a very distinct personality, in order for them to have a distinct background, motive, everything should be pretty clear cut. You don't want to confuse names. You really don't want to confuse people's personalities. You want to understand this is this person and here's a checklist of everything you need to know about them. Physical description, what their job is, what their background is, and what their personality is. You need all of that stuff. That creates the puzzle again. And that also allows for a sense of coziness because you can be in control of this to a point. As the reader, you understand it. You feel like it's not slipping away from you. Everything feels contained. Everything feels like it's within a set world with set rules and boundaries. It's a game. And games are cozy. Absolutely amazing. But the genius of Agatha Christie is that she often stepped out of her wheelhouse. More often than we think she did. As I said, the ABC Murders really did that, feeling more like a gritty thriller than a cozy murder mystery. And that was also the case with two of her books that are considered her masterpieces by a lot of people. One is And Then There Were None, which is the first Agatha Christie book I ever read, and I can't find my copy. And the other is Endless Night, which is a gothic novel. A novel that deals in curses. A novel about a house that may or may not be haunted. A novel about a love story and a romance that is kind of doomed to fail. But it is still a mystery. This and Then There Were None both have distinct tones to them. They feel less cozy mystery and more dark and sinister. And Then There Were None is quite bloody. And there are multiple deaths in a very closed and claustrophobic environment that come out of left field and almost make you jump. And then this, Endless Night, is bleak in its tone. It has a very dark and gothic setting. A remote village with a remote home in it. People that you can't really trust with mysterious backgrounds. It feels very different to everything else she wrote. This is Christie going gothic, and I've talked about it before. Agatha Christie had a very set formula that she reworked over and over again by moving the pieces around. But she also liked to step out of her wheelhouse into other grittier, darker genres, while taking her formula with her and seeing how it could be adapted into the gothic, into the thriller. Absolutely incredible. And I have barely scratched the surface into what makes Agatha Christie a genius writer, but she is certainly someone who is loved and cherished by countless people around the world, myself included. I love everything that she does. She was an incredible writer who leaned into the cozy murder mystery, who defined it in a lot of ways. And I can't thank her enough for it. What a genius. If you enjoyed this and you want me to do more The Genius Of, let me know. I love doing these videos. It's really taxing on my brain to try and pinpoint what makes one writer so unique. It's a nice challenge for me. So let me know. If you love what I do and you want to support me, then join my Patreon community. It is a wonderful community of intersectional bookworms. And as always, subscribe for books.